This is the Advaita After Hours podcast, where we explore how spirituality influences our daily lives. Hari Om. I am Rajesh, and in today's conversation, Narayanan, Shillika, Gopi, Neha, and I reflect on the differences between Seva and Seva Bhava, the importance of intentionality behind any act of Seva. We delve into our personal experiences of bringing Seva Bhava into our personal and professional lives, and we discuss how that has enriched us. So sit back, listen, and reflect as you join us on this journey.
Hariom, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. Today is going to be a follow-up of the conversation that we had last week. And last week, what we talked about was we had the company of Arjun and Shruti, and we spoke a little bit about Seva in general and how Seva can change one's mindset to their own purpose in life, to their own station in life, and how it gives them a different way of connecting with the community and connecting with themselves. Today, I wanted to have a slightly different twist on the conversation, which is when we look at it from a spiritual angle, how do you start to take the seva that you're doing and look at it as a seva bhava and have that sort of a mentality and outlook to it? So maybe I will start off with kicking it to Naranji with maybe just a summary on how do you think about the concept of Seva Bhava, and when someone says that, what does that mean to you, and what's some of the background?
Right. Lots to unpack in that question on how to do Seva Bhava. So the first thing that comes to mind is Hanuman, right? When you talk about Seva Bhava. Deha bhavo tu dasosmyaham, jiva bhavo tvam shagam, atma bhavo tvamevaham. Right? So, I am dasa in my body form. If I consider myself to be body consciousness, if I consider myself to be the the mind intellect complex, I am a part of you. And if I consider myself to be Atma, I am you, no different. So service is, again, the first part. We do service with three things, with our body, with our mind, and with our word. I mean, it's very interesting, the service through mind, right? Because everything starts there. That I need to do something is something that starts there. So how do we do it? I think it has to start with having that feeling that I need to do something, and there is a calling, there's a higher purpose that I need to listen to, in order to, it could be whatever, in order to serve others, in order to serve myself, in order to do whatever it needs to be done to take care of, eventually, if you think everything is God's will, to that purpose, right? So you have to have it in the mind, and then you have to have all the actions that are happening, and every time you do actions, go back to Bhagavad Gita and say, all actions will have to be done either as Ishwararpita Buddhi, and then whatever you get as Prasada Buddhi. Because these are, from a spiritual point of view, I think I don't think there is anything more in performing actions that we do bodily. Mind purification happens, and then there is lots of churning happens. If you don't expect the rewards of your action, I think that in itself is a wonderful step that we can take. And then again, there is service to yourself in terms of the sadhanas and the activities that you have to do to refine you and make yourself more useful in that sense. So mishmash of different things.
So I think there were two themes that I heard in what you said, Narayanji, that I think we can delve into. One was in Seva Bhava, in some ways, the intention or even the target audience can change a little bit. And then the second is the way in which we do it, meaning that the approach that we have also changes. So maybe I will move it to Gopi ji. When you have um, engaged in seva with a bhava mindset, and you think about your own spiritual growth, how has that impacted your spiritual growth in any way, and how did the mindset play into that?
I'm going to start where Naranji left off, right? Where he was talking about actions and results. So, at least in my personal life, when we work in corporate America, whatever your project is or whatever you're doing in corporate America, how much ever you try, and again, this is all me talking personally, at the end of the day, you're always looking for that result. There's always that result in mind, I feel. And, there's emotions comes into play. There's politics comes into play. There's so many things that come into play, when you're doing, corporate America work. So I feel when I contrast that with what I do at Chinna Mission, the seva that I do at Chinna Mission, I feel there's so much difference is when I do what I do at Chinna Mission, I feel I'm doing the right thing, or first of all, yes, I'm doing the right thing. And second of all, it's truly, the result doesn't impact me. I'm just saying, okay, I'm doing my actions purely because I feel this is the right thing to do. And so if I can take that attitude and apply to my corporate America life or even at home, I think that'll be great. Sometimes I succeed because that thought comes into my head and saying, okay, let me apply this, of what I'm doing, and it's definitely a different feeling. And I don't think I can write it down or I can say it in as many words. It's a different feeling, I feel.
How would you differentiate seva from volunteerism? And it may be the same thing. We may be using one Sanskrit or one English word, but in your mind, is there any difference between volunteerism and then performing seva?
I mean, sometimes volunteer becomes voluntold. Maybe that's sometimes people do it because I have to sign up. But I think you should do truly doing seva, and I feel there's no external forces. I mean, again, not to be you're just doing because it's the right thing to do, or you're doing God's work, kind of thing. And I think that's if there is a distinction, that's what I would put a distinction.
While I was just listening to all of you speak, I wonder if it's very necessary to constantly have in mind that we are doing seva. Is it possible for us to go about life and everyday moments and think that all of our actions are a form of seva? If you have that kind of a mindset, then you don't feel like you're necessarily actively doing something. So, I think I'd like to recount a small story. Back in college, I was in my first year. We had our midterm examinations going on. I was walking down the stairs and I saw this girl crying. I had no idea who she was. And I asked her, I said, hey, are you okay? Like, is everything all right? Do you need something? And, she was telling me how she mistook the time of her examination, and now she was too late, and the teacher wouldn't allow her to, kind of go into the exam hall, and she was going to fail the subject, and everything was crashing down around her, and she was just feeling helpless. I had a couple of conversations with her, asked her if she needed a ride somewhere because, she didn't look like she was in any frame of mind to ride her scooty. And she looks at me and she says, you don't even know me. Like, why are you trying to help? And I truly just made the statement. I said, you don't need to know somebody to help them. And I continue to walk. Many years later, well, literally, I think about a year and a half later, I met this girl again. I had no recollection of who she was, but she comes up to me and, she recounts this whole incident. And she said, that made a difference to me that day. I never realized, but I think how beautiful would that be if we can go about our everyday life and just not have this thing where I need to do something, but live life like that. I don't know if I'm making sense, but if your everyday tasks, you look at it as a form of seva to him, to Bhagavan, to, whichever higher power you want, it's a beautiful life.
Follow up on that story. At that moment, did you feel the sense that you were helping her just for her, or was there a greater sense of purpose in that? And then secondly, when she came back to you and recounted that, how did that link back to God or the divine for you?
I think it brought me back to some stories of that I've heard of Sai Baba, where you never know how Sairam acts. People come into your life and you have those Sairam moments. I mean, I think I've said this time and again, even in these podcasts episodes. For me, when the whole event was happening, I really didn't think about myself in the situation at all. I mean, I saw this girl, she was crying, and I asked her what I could do. And because it was just the most natural human thing to do. I didn't think I was necessarily thinking about it too much. When she came and recounted this story to me a year and a half later and, spoke to me, it I think I was truly quite shocked and I was confused and I didn't understand, how, because I didn't remember it. It was a very insignificant memory to me. I was just doing something and I kept walking by. Um, but it made me think about Sairam and it made me think of, there's this, again, another story of Sairam where there is a family and there's a girl who's really sick. And the only cure for her is, having some vibhuti and some medicine. There's no way to get it. There's a storm, it's the middle of the night. Conditions are just not ripe for her to get this medicine. Meanwhile, far away in Shirdi, Sai Baba, sees this man who is traveling and says, why don't you just stop over at this place and hand over this vibhuti and this prasadam? And the man says, okay, I mean, I have no idea how to get there. He says, you'll find your way. And, it's through multiple different journeys. This man actually does make it, but he also doesn't know how he has managed to find this driver who's driving him through the stormy night and who's going through all these, turbulent conditions. But the girl does get the medicine and, she gets fine. So if you can think of yourself as that instrument and, we've spoken about availability, about capability in the past. If you can allow him to work through you, and, so you're not thinking about yourself.
Naranji kicked it off with a great example of using Hanuman as, in some ways, an epitome of Seva Bhava, in that everything he did with, Sri Ram in mind. And that gave him the ability to do things that even he did not know if he could do or not. It gave him that confidence in the ability. Um, so maybe Naranji, could you talk a little bit about starting seva with God in mind rather than doing the seva and then seeing God in the result or seeing it later? Have you noticed a difference in your approach and efficacy and outcome?
I really don't know, right? So I don't know where that transition point was, that, or if even if there was a transition point. In terms of course, there was so much of time in my life where things were I was doing for the sake of doing, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. We have done things just for the sake of doing. Getting something done doesn't matter if it is a seva or if it is whatever way it is, even if it was a selfish thing that I need to get it done because that's the only way I could get whatever, has been there. And I don't think that the whole of that also, I don't think has gone away. There is still aspects where actions are done for a certain reward, certain thing. But the only thing is to realize and recognize that, look, this is something that I need to be careful of and be working towards correcting. And so, I mean, if we all have done or are able to do all of it in a totally selfless way, I think the world would be a very, very different place. So there is this correction, there is this. But to your question as to whether now from what I see now and knowing what I know after getting so much of gray hair, if the question is now, do I do it and then God comes in and do it as a seva, as an offering to God, I think I try, at least in a fraction of my waking hours, I try to think that the actions are Ishwararpita with Ishwararpita Buddhi, and what I get is with Prasada Buddhi. And I try to make sure that even if I deviate from this, I get reminded of that very quickly. People around me know that they can remind me that I'm not following what I've been saying. And which is sometimes humbling to be told by your children that this was not what you've been telling. This is not what,
Yeah,
and it is a very revealing thing, and I'm so thankful that they can tell me this in a very jovial way most of the time.
yeah, no, I think you're right. Children are very good at pointing out when you don't follow your own advice, but it's not always very jovial, at least in my experience. Um, Nehaji, what about for you? What about the idea of how do you introduce the bhava into the seva while you're doing it, and how does that, in some ways, change your approach or how it feels?
I think for me, what I've come to learn is that when we are offering seva, it what really matters is the intention with which we do it. Because some people, from my personal experience, so I understand the importance of seva, and I understand um, how much you should be doing it for your own progress. However, you don't always find the time to do it, especially when you have two little children. It's harder to find the time to do that seva. So I actually had posed this question to Swamiji and asked him about, this dilemma that I had, that I want to do more, but I don't have the time to do more. So is it me rearranging my priorities, or what is the best way to go about it? And he gave a very beautiful answer. And basically, what he said was that when you are even caring for your children, that can be a seva, as long as you don't think of doing it as a mother and just doing it as an instrument. Looking at your children as, the essence of God, and doing that for them even makes it a seva. So since then, when a simple act like putting the dishwasher, right? That can be a seva to God. So it doesn't have to be for somebody, but it's just your intention with which you do it. If you think that I'm doing this seva, I'm the doer, then the service is lost right then and there. But if you, just like Narayanji said, right? If you have that Ishwar Arpana Buddhi and Ishwar Prasad Buddhi, then every little act can become an act of seva. It kind of takes me back to what Brahmacharini Sandhya ji had mentioned, right? Even that smallest act of walking or breathing can become a seva, as long as you think of it as Ramakaj, right? So I feel like it's the lens and it's the intention that matters the most. Ultimately, if our goal is ego effacement, then this is the best way to do it, because now you're not the doer. You don't take the doership for it, but you just do it as an instrument, and that becomes seva.
I think that really echoes what's been said before. I think, Shillika, you also started with this idea that everything can be an act of seva. Gopi had in the beginning also mentioned this sense of there's a different feeling, right? And sometimes it's hard to put a name on that feeling, but it feels different when you're doing it as a true act of seva versus it's just a responsibility that you have to do. Gopiji, one thing that you had brought up was this idea of trying to translate it into our um, professional lives, right? I think one of the big things we all think about is how do you still maintain the spiritual lens on days that are not Sunday morning during the rest of the
I
week?
know.
How do you continue that over? So, any insight on either things that have worked or challenges that you have faced with carrying over this Seva Bhava Buddhi or this Arpana Buddhi over to some things that are less obviously volunteerism, things like such as work or even at home with children? You have a teenager as opposed to us who have younger children, so those have its own challenges.
Yeah, I think Rajesh, you said it great. I mean, I think kids bring out, our true identity sometimes, because we are quick to point out advice to them, and Because I always tell my daughter, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. And she waits for me to say something nasty, and she's all over it. But anyway, I digress. But I think, yeah, being a parent is definitely one of those sevas. I feel, we all do it, so automatically. We don't, think about it. It's one of the greatest savers, I feel, even taking care of your parents from that perspective. I know we all, go through that. I mean, we don't say, oh, you don't put a thing in the Facebook page or put a thing on the WhatsApp page. Hey, I took care of my parents, or I called my mom today, those kind of things. So, I mean, so going back to corporate America, I just feel, you get so caught up in the race of corporate America. So just bringing that, just staying humble for me is another form, I feel, of a form of seva, just being humble. Because sometimes, you don't want to take the credit. You want to give the credit to the team. I'm just trying to give a different spin to it. But just staying humble, and saying, success is team success and it's on my success, things like that. I think those are some ways that I try to implement it in my work culture.
Sorry. No, I, yeah. I want to tell a story because Shillika ji is taking the wholesale stories angle here. I want to tell a story now. See if I can tell a story because everybody wants her stories. So this is a story that I heard from Swami Sarvapriyananda. I know I might have told this. I've used this in enough places. So he was transiting through Lucknow airport late in the night, midnight once, and then all the security guys, TSA guys said, Swamiji, kuch bataiye, kuch provision kijiye, say something. So I asked me, what do you want to say? And then they collected all these 10 or 12 people and said, no, tell us something. So he asked, do you guys pray? Yeah, we pray. When do you pray? We really don't get time to pray. We are here doing all of our jobs every day. We don't get to pray. But when I go back home, I pray to Hanumanji. Then he asked, how do I pray to Hanumanji all the time? You've been telling that God should be there in all your work. So he said, when every passenger comes through the line and you do the screening with your metal detector on them, say that one more Hanumanji, one more flower on your feet. Every time a passenger comes in, do this. You are doing, here is one more Hanumanji, here is one more Hanumanji, and one more leaf, one more flower I'm putting in my mind. So it really hit me hard because when I teach and I have 100 students sitting in the class, I think sometimes, what made these 100 kids, of course, they paid the tuition and came there, but otherwise, what made them come and sit and listen to me? Right. And therefore, I have a responsibility to them and I should see them. Of course, we see everybody as a customer, but I have to see it bigger than a customer and think of them as somebody who have been, put there by God for me to do my action, which has to be a service to Him, right? So it makes teaching beautifully entertaining, even if they're not listening to me.
No, the Shabri
So,
story that, Swami Ishwarananda ji said, right? About how she continued to treat every single person who came into that ashram as Rama. Because when he asks her, he says, how did you know? And he said, today you happen to be Rama, but every single person who's come in here has been Rama. And that's how she has been doing the seva.
I have two reflections to share. The first is to Gopiji's point. Right now I'm listening to this one set of lectures by Swami Omkarananda, and in that he talks about the Shanti mantra Badram Karni Vishnuyamadeva, but in that he specifically talks about how you pray to really understand your body as an instrument of God. I think Neha ji had mentioned it. But also, one of the things he talks about is at night, before going to bed, thinking about what you did that day as a form of seva. And it doesn't have to be some great thing, but even something as simple as saying a kind word to somebody. Something where you look at your body as an instrument of God, right? The words that you say are is a way in which you use your instrument of speech that was given to you, the things that you choose to listen to, the things that you choose to hear. Everything is an instrument of God. And so if you use your speech and your actions as yet another instrument of God and you do something in a kindly way with that approach, that also can be a form of seva to the world at large. After the monkey story, not the monkey story, the Hanuman and everyone coming through the thing and story, there was one night that we had Shobha ji from the Chinmay Mission at LA. She came and spent some time with us when Swami Ishrananda had come, and we had the pleasure of hosting her. And everything happens for a reason. And one of those nights, I brought her home from Chinmay Mission. So we had like a 30-minute drive. And that was the first time I actually got to speak to her in some depth. And she works at the VA hospital as a hospitalist at night. And so we were talking a little bit about medicine. And obviously, being a nighttime doctor at the Veterans Affairs Hospital, you sometimes have some unpleasant experiences with veterans that have PTSD and other such things. And she was talking a lot about how things that Swami Ishrananda has said has made her be able to look at her patients in a different way. In that, when she approaches patients now, she tries to find the God in them that's struggling. So it doesn't look at them as a patient that is having delirium or a patient that's having pain, but she looks at that as this is God or this is Krishna in this person coming to me with pain. And she can't treat him any differently than she would otherwise. But she mentioned very emphatically that since she started doing that, patients would look at her and they would say, I just feel heard. I felt like you cared. So this idea where even though her actions didn't change, the bhava that she brought into it was something that people clearly recognized. The other story that made a big difference, and Shillika, you can take credit for this story also. This is the Dr. Stephen story that you had mentioned. This is just as a quick recap. This is the story where there's this prestigious pediatrician who's going to go receive some award. His flight gets uh, derailed and he has this huge detour. He somehow ends up in this little house with this woman with a child that's ill. And it turns out that the only doctor that can help that child is Dr. Stephen, meaning that that reunion was supposed to happen. And that story made a huge impression on me. And during my clinic days, I usually have about 26 to 30 patients I have to see. In the morning, it's really easy to be very enthusiastic, but in the afternoon, it's kind of hard to maintain that enthusiasm. And I think we all have problems with maintaining enthusiasm in the afternoon, but here it's hard because the patient still expects an enthusiastic doctor, but you're kind of tired by the end of the day. And one of the things that personally has made a big difference is that I've started thinking before every encounter where I go to see that patient, I think to myself, this encounter is divinely meant to happen, that I am meant to see this person and that person is meant to see me. And that this isn't something that my scheduler put together. This is something that God has put together for us to meet each other. And it's really made my afternoons when I would see my enthusiasm flagging dramatically different. It just brings a different gravity to the situation. So those are two reflections I wanted to share.
I just want to mention that being in the medical field, that itself is such a seva, right? Like that's, you are making big difference in somebody's life. So that is a stark contrast from what Gopiji was talking about being in corporate America. So I want to share my experience as well. So I work at a company where my team is responsible for the revenue of the company. For a long time, I had an inner conflict because that's not what my spiritual journey is all about. Material wealth and constantly thinking about ways to upsell or cross sell or get more revenue for the company I struggled with that a lot. And finally, through a lot of listening and a lot of mananam, I came to a conclusion which I feel very comfortable with. And that is that God has put me in this position in this company to do something for the company. In my eyes, it may be very materialistic. In my eyes, it may be the fact that, this really doesn't matter much. But in this whole scheme of things, there is a role that this company is playing, that I am playing in this company, however fleeting it might be. And if I'm put there in that position, in this place, then it is my duty to do my best. And that also becomes a seva if you do it for God. So I became very comfortable with this thought. So every time I get into work, when I get out from my car in the parking lot, I always enter as a devotee of God and not as, this person who is having to talk about all of the leadership stuff and things like that. I just enter saying, I'm a devotee. You have put me here. You give me the inspiration. You get things done and you enjoy the fruits of it. And it really has made me feel very comfortable with what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that is important. I would push back on the notion that um, just because you have a job that might seem more obviously service worthy, I think unless you still have the intention of it being an act of service and you're doing it for the right reason, um, even though people might benefit, I don't know that it carries the same personal spiritual benefit um, to it. Meaning that I think there's many people in service roles that do it because they're supposed to do it. They're doing it because it is a great position in society. But um, I think things change when you look at it from a different angle. But also, I think the one thing that to me it's clarified, and Shillika and I have talked about it, is that in all of our jobs, we have times where there are things that are ethically in a gray zone. You have to make decisions that aren't outright wrong, right? Or aren't outright illegal, but they seem a little bit gray. And sometimes I have felt that having this approach, like you mentioned, of going in saying, I'm doing God's work, provides a lot of clarity in those situations on what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and even in a gray area, what the correct thing to do is in that situation.
Absolutely. I mean, the intention is everything. If, like you mentioned, right? Even if you're in the service field and you do it because you want to earn money, it is a different kind of work as opposed to you thinking that this is a seva and going into it with that attitude, for sure.
It's there, right? Even if you're doing, Bhagavad Gita says, right? Even if you're doing durajara for me, that's fine too, right? You're still coming to me.
At the same time, there's no harm in having aspirations at a corporate level or whatever work you do, right? I mean, there's absolutely no harm so long as you're not stabbing somebody in the back or, trampling somebody while getting to that spot. I don't think there's anything wrong in having aspirations.
Yeah, I mean, Artha Kama, Artha Karma Dharma, right? Like they're all noble acts as long as the money that's earned is earned in a righteous way.
Yeah, you're right.
Like to earn non-righteous money and then give 10% of it to the temple and say now you've whitewashed all the money is anyway.
Get from dharma to moksha, you have to go through artha and kama.
Shilka, when you think about your role, especially when you transitioned away from working outside the home to working inside the home with the children, how has that transition helped, and where has kind of God fit into that transition?
I think I really answered it in the first time when I was talking. The moment for me personally, if I keep saying, oh, I'm doing this as a seva, and I'm doing this as a seva, and now I'm doing this also as a seva, it takes all the bhakti bhavam away for me personally. I do because I can. So and I will continue to do. I can do this, I will do it. And I think for me, I believe I have been given these different roles and these different opportunities really by Bhagwan. And so I'm doing what he has asked me to do right now. But I don't necessarily feel like I'm saying I am doing this as a seva, because then I feel like that ego continues to get heightened. So for me, that is one of the very basic things. It's, yeah, something has come onto my lap, I'll do it. Yeah, I don't feel like I like to coin the term or define it as this is why I'm doing it. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it really does bring up a really good point. And Naranji, if you can provide some actual textual backup, but I think it is one of those things where when God has given you an ability, it is your responsibility to use that ability also. And in some ways, um, like you were mentioning, if you have an aptitude for something and an opportunity comes asking you for that aptitude, um, one way to approach it also is to think that this is not my responsibility, but my um, form of gratitude or acknowledgement that it is not me that has earned this attitude or this aptitude. It is not me that has earned this opportunity, but rather I'm just an instrument and I should make myself of use because I'm being asked to be
Yeah.
valuable.
I think if you look at Bhagavad Gita, there are several slogas that talk about that instrument effect, right? You know, even in fourth chapter, Karma Yoga, in third chapter, it's all about how to do action, how to renounce the fruits of your action. Renouncing the fruits of the action, you really can't renounce the fruits of the action. You can only condition your mind to accept everything that comes as prasadam. You can't really renounce. And the whole idea of renouncing the fruits of action is impossible because you have to accept something. Otherwise, the equation will not be balanced. So, but that acceptance as prasadam. And to Shilikaji's point, it is very important. I think in the initial stages, and if you see Bhagavad Gita's evolution also, is asking Arjuna to do your action, knowing what you're doing. Here is your duty. Know your duty, and then it transitions into what that knowing actually means. Right? That knowing actually means being able to do it without having to consciously go through the act of doing, the karmani pashet. So you have to be an actor who does not think that you're acting, and your action, and the examples, I mean, lots of Swamiji say this example. For an actor, in the morning he might act in a movie, it may be a villain. In the afternoon you might be a romantic hero. In the evening you might be something else. But when he comes home, he's none of those, right? He has shed the identification with all of that. So all these actions go through us, dictated by Prakriti. All actions are done by Prakriti. You are doing nothing. Prakriti is doing all the actions, right? You are the vessel. So Swami Chinmayananda says, Swami Tapovanam always used to say, all you have to do is to keep the vessel clean. And all you have to do is to keep the vessel clean so that the grace will fill it in. Don't think you're filling it in. You will never fill it. All your action is to keep the vessel clean so that the action flows through you, and whatever flows through you is a beneficial thing for somebody who is receiving on the other side, and eventually it purifies you. I think, and then it encompasses whether it is seva for seva, whether it is, like Nehaji said, corporate action. It's all, then you are a vehicle through which the action is happening, and in the process you learn to purify yourself.
I kind of want to go back to what Shilikaji was talking about. In one of Swami Aparajitananda's lectures, he had mentioned about this karma yoga, right? And how that Ishwar Arpan Buddhi, or that Seva Bhava, it cannot come without an intense love for God and an intense bhakti and intense devotion. Just knowing that all of the things that God has done for you, right from, we just know about this life, how many lives before that. But even in this life, everything is working perfectly for you. And just once our attention is taken towards that, then all of a sudden we start feeling like, I want to do something back for him. And that is where that seva bhav comes from, that extreme devotion. So I really, like she mentioned, I feel like it's really, everything is intertwined. Otherwise, it's not possible to be that instrument.
The same thing is what we are doing in Narada Bhakti Sutra now, right? Intense bhakti, and how do you get that love to God, and the process of doing it.
the other thing that I think you brought up that Nehaji touched upon is also, kind of having a sankalpa when you're going to work, right? Or a promise or a directive that you're going to say to yourself, right? In that when you're getting out of your car, stepping and going into work, you're saying a sankalpa, or you're making a promise to yourself. I am going into work today, as Gopiji mentioned, to help my team or to contribute where I can or to work to the best of my ability. Versus, I think if you don't make that sankalpa very clear over the course of the day, it could change to I'm going today to make sure that no one treads in my territory, to make sure that, this project is mine and no one comes in, swoops the project out from under my feet, right? And so in some ways, having a clear sankalpa for us in the morning when we go into work, when we go to do whatever action we do, whether that's conscious or unconscious, is also important. I think with this, let's wrap up for today. I think this is a really wonderful discussion. And one of the things that came out so loud and clear is that it doesn't matter what you do necessarily. It's about the attitude with which you approach it. And this idea that within that attitude is an understanding that we're just a magnificent instrument from God who has been given so many beautiful, beautiful skills and attributes. So thank you all very much. Hari Om. Good night.
Thank you.
Hariom.